She actually calls me Ottawa's own Matt Damon, and I will never live that down as long as I live. Hi, my name is Paul Sokoloff, and I'm a botanist at the Canadian Museum of Nature. We're here today inside the solarium at the museum to talk a little bit about botanists and what they do in space. So, when you're thinking about botanists, you probably think about people who arrange flowers for a living, and that's not what we do, at least not every day. Those are florists. They have amazing jobs. But no, botanists, what we do is we look at classifying living organisms that fit neatly, sometimes more or less neatly, within the plant kingdom. And so, if it's green, if it photosynthesizes, we're dealing with it. At the museum, we're interested in how we can classify these organisms, and we use our collections housed in a giant plant library called a herbarium to do this. Now, in the movies and TV shows we're about to look at, we're not going to see a herbarium, and we're not going to see a lot of people classifying things, with a few exceptions. Let's just jump right in. We're actually going to watch a scene from Star Trek: The Next Generation of everyone's favorite botanist, Keiko O'Brien.
Keiko O'Brien, Guinan and I are returning to the Enterprise after a fascinating visit to the planet Marlonia.
Is that a Drubidium fructus?
Actually, it's a Drubidium calamus. You can tell by the shape of the leaves. I didn't know you were interested in plant biology.
I took a class at the Academy. I don't remember very much, though.
Enterprise to shuttlecraft Fermi.
This is the Fermi. Go ahead, Enterprise.
We've just received a distress signal from the Starfleet science team on Lytos 7.
We're caught in some sort of energy field.
How about full impulse?
Aye, sir.
Okay, this right here. This is what we do when we are out collecting plants in the field. I mean, okay, look, she's got the plants in the shuttlecraft and she's holding on to them. That's what we do when we're out in the field in the Arctic. We grab our plants, put them in the helicopter, we cradle them like babies. Why? Because that's the whole reason we're doing this, those samples. And I love this, what she's doing right here. Ro is like, oh, is this thing? She says a Latin name. And then Keiko is like, no, it's this. You can tell by the shape of the leaves. This is literally a conversation I have on a daily basis with my colleagues. This is how botanists tell apart species. We call this morphology, the shape of it. So it's just really exciting for me to see Latin names and morphology being discussed. Now, Keiko O'Brien was in Star Trek: The Next Generation, but she actually moved over to Star Trek: Deep Space Nine because her husband, Miles O'Brien, he got a job on the station. They move over to Deep Space Nine. She does this job as a school teacher for a few years, but she's not really digging it. And so then things change a little bit for her. So let's take a look at Deep Space Nine.
Keiko, there's an agrobiology expedition leaving for the Janitsa Mountains in Bajor in 2 weeks. They need a chief botanist. I think you could probably qualify.
On Bajor?
That's right. They've never surveyed these mountains. It's a very important expedition.
How long is this expedition supposed to last?
6 months.
I can't leave you and Molly for 6 months.
Look, you can take Molly with you. I've already checked. And as for me, well, Bajor's only 3 hours away in a runabout. We can manage.
So this here is a conversation that lots of academic couples have, right? Somebody's put their dreams on hold for somebody else's dream. But now Miles is telling his wife, you need to go be a botanist, be the best damn botanist in the galaxy. And that speaks to me on a few levels, right? This is something that happens with me. My husband often tells me, go enjoy your field season. And when you come back, then we'll pick up where we left off. But you need to do this. And, that's the kind of relationship you want to be in. So here, Miles is being an excellent botany spouse.
Be a botanist, Keiko. Be the best damn botanist in the galaxy.
All right, so this next movie is really near and dear to my heart because it's The Martian. And chances are, if you've thought about a botanist recently, it's probably been Mark Watney growing potatoes on Mars. Come on, 2015, you couldn't go anywhere without thinking about let's save Matt Damon yet again. So we're going to talk a little bit about this because this is also something that I do here at the museum. Since 2014, I've been working with a group in the States called the Mars Society at the Mars Desert Research Station in southeast Utah. And there, astronauts train for what it'll be like to live and work on Mars. And what do I do down there? Well, I collect plants and do biodiversity studies, but that's cool too, because that tells us something about that unique planetary analog in a really interesting desert. All right, let's dive into the life of Mark Watney, also known as the Martian.
Right. Let's do the math. Our service mission here was supposed to last 31 souls. For redundancy, they sent 68 souls worth of food. That's for 6 people. So for just me, that's gonna last 300 souls, which I figure I can stretch to 400 if I ration. So I gotta figure out a way to grow 3 years worth of food here on a planet where nothing grows. Luckily, I'm a botanist. Mars will come to fear my botany powers.
All right, so this is it. This is that iconic scene where he's like, look, I'm a botanist. Mars will come to fear my botany powers. What he's doing here, we probably wouldn't call botany at the museum. We would call that horticulture. Horticulture is definitely a part of botany, but typically when we're talking about being a botanist, we're talking about people who look at dead plants, not living ones. Dead plants are, of course, no help to Mark Watney when he's stranded on the surface of Mars, so it's a good thing he's a horticulturalist. All right, so this next one is memorable because it's when he starts growing potatoes on Mars to survive. Let's have a look. Okay, so yes, here he is. He's got the Martian soil, which we call regolith, because it doesn't contain organic weathered components in it. He's brought it into the hab, and he's using metabolic waste to act as a fertilizer. And, you know, like, honestly, I gag when I watch this scene. But it's not a terrible idea, because it turns out, and scientists at NASA have looked into this, based on both data brought back from uncrewed missions to Mars and from Martian meteorites, they found that Martian rocks and Martian soil does contain many of the macronutrients and minerals you would need to grow plants. Now, adding this organic component, that's a good way to fertilize the soil, even if it's a little disgusting. But the biggest problem with this scene, you know, if there is a problem, is that you can't just bring Martian regolith into the hab and use it as is. It's full of nasty chemicals called perchlorates, which are chlorine-based compounds that are not good for plants and they're not good for people. So you'd really need to leach that out of the soil or the regolith first before you would use it. But otherwise, I mean, you know, he is kind of desperate, so one problem at a time.
All natural, organic, Martian-grown potatoes. You don't hear that every day, do you?
So this next clip is from the movie Sunshine, which is an old favorite of mine. It's made by Danny Boyle. It's got all sorts of big name actors, Chris Evans, Benedict Wong, and of course, everyone's favorite, Michelle Yeoh as a space botanist. And they are off on a journey to the sun to reignite it. In this story, the sun is dimming, and they need to deliver a nuclear payload to reignite the sun to save the Earth. Let's dig in.
Welcome to Icarus 2.
Okay, so this is a shot of the oxygen garden on board the ship that is going to reignite the sun. And this is important because, plants provide essential oxygen exchange that could be used on long-term spaceflight to help keep a crew alive. And, looking at this movie, you can tell that Michelle Yeoh is the happiest character here. That's because she spends all day in a garden. I mean, how can you not be happy when you're tending to a crop like this? The psychological aspect of taking care of plants is going to be immensely valuable to future astronauts. And in fact, we're growing plants right now on the space station that show positive psychological benefits. Here in particular, though, this is really cool because in the middle, you see that there are a whole bunch of parlor palms growing out of the middle of the oxygen garden. And in Latin, we call those Comedoria elegans. And these particular plants were found by a NASA clean air study in the 80s to remove various volatile compounds from the air, all sorts of toxic pollutants that you really wouldn't want to inhale yourself. So not only are they getting good oxygen exchange there, these plants on this ship are part of the life support system cleaning the air. All right, so next up, we have another clip of Michelle Yeoh hard at work in the oxygen garden on board the Icarus, the spacecraft taking them to the sun. Okay, so here, Michelle Yeoh is harvesting carrots. These are probably going to be really good on long-term spaceflight because you can grow them hydroponically quite well. There's no reason to bring a ton of soil with you if that's just going to add extra weight to your spacecraft. And because Michelle Yeoh is the best space botanist out there, she knows that carrots were some of the first plants that were flown to space on board the Bion 5 satellite, which was launched by Soviet authorities to study species in microgravity. Okay, so this last film is an absolute classic. You cannot talk about space botany without talking about Silent Running. Silent Running, it's got everything. It's got robots, it's got ships full of plants from everywhere, and it has Bruce Dern murdering his colleagues. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the plants. Let's have a look.
Fields of children running wild in the sun. Like a forest is your child, growing wild in the sun, doomed in his innocence.
Okay, so this first scene really sets the scene on board this spaceship, the Valley Forge, which is transporting plant specimens. I'm sorry, the last plant specimens in existence around the orbit of Saturn. And so you get Bruce Dern's character strolling through these various habitats, have birds landing on his shoulder. It's very idyllic. But the idea is that you're seeing that there's a diversity of life that has been preserved in these domes. And this is going to be really important. I really hope we never get to the point where we have to send our plants to space to protect them. But if we do that, we're going to want to make sure we're preserving as much biodiversity as possible. This is why when we're talking about biodiversity conservation, we talk about species targets and the goals of preserving as many species as possible. But also, when we do things like this, like seed banking in places like Svalbard and in Kew Gardens, we often try to send as broad a diversity as possible of seeds from different origins to make sure we're conserving as much biodiversity as possible. All right, so for this final scene, we're going to see how Freeman Lowell, the botanist on board, Bruce Dern's character, saves the last forest in existence. Okay, so this is where you can see that he's lost it. And yes, all the murder aside, he's not thinking straight because he forgot kind of the core tenet of botany, which is plants need light to survive. I mean, come on, most people know that. It doesn't require a doctorate. All right, so he figures it out in time. And he puts lights up across the dome, and the forest, he saves the forest. But in reality, with ships that far out anyway, the sun would just be an especially bright star. He would have needed some sort of supplemental lighting anyway the whole time. And so, maybe not like the perfect depiction of how plants would grow in space, But I still think it's pretty cool that the main character of a 1970s sci-fi epic was a botanist.
That's right. This happens to be nature's greatest gift.
Hey, now, what's the big deal? I can't see the difference between that and this anyway.
You don't see the difference? The difference is that I grew it. That's what the difference is. And that it calls back a time when there were flowers all over the earth. And there were things growing all over the place, not just in some domed enclosures blasted some millions of miles out into space.
Thank you very much for joining me on this journey of botanists in space. And thank you, Hollywood, for remembering that as we expand out and look to explore the final frontier, we're going to need to remember to bring plants and the people who love them along for the ride.